Good evening and welcome to the evening session of the Security Watch India conference here at Hotel Lalit on 9 December 2009. And with me is Vice Admiral Pradeep Kaushiva. Welcome to the conference, Admiral Kaushiva.
Thank you very much.
Sir, you've served with distinction in the Indian Navy, you've been a mariner, and you're an expert on maritime and coastal security issues. If you could give us a brief biography of what you did in the Navy and how can it be relevant to ensuring the safety of coastal assets, especially oil and gas, which is mostly along the coast?
First, few words about what I did in the Navy. I did very limited activity in the Navy. I mostly handled operations. So that was limited to that in scope. Other than that, I did some training assignments. Insofar as the
other part is how can coastal security be better protected?
Coastal security is actually a pretty complex subject because coastal security is impacted by every consideration, every vulnerability of high seas originated, sea-based originated, seabed originated activity. And coastal security is also impacted by land-based vulnerabilities, and therefore the threats which come from the seas and threats which are originating on the ground, on land, equally impact the coastal regions. And coastal regions, what we may call littoral regions, would be from say 50 kilometers out at sea to maybe 5 kilometers on land. Now this is a very vulnerable area. So both of them are impacted by threats or vulnerabilities of that.
Right. So the definition of the Indian coastline is 12 nautical miles out into the sea. Now what does this really mean given the fact that the UN has given us exclusive economic zones for the exploration of mineral rights to every nation, and so also we have it. What kind of legitimacy do we exercise in international waters beyond those 12 nautical miles and within these exclusive economic zones?
There was International Law of the Sea Conference which had taken place over a period of about 15-20 years. Discussion had gone on and very actively during the decade of 1970s till they decided on that seas designated as common heritage of mankind and a regulatory scheme for assigning responsibilities, assigning a nation's rights, a coastal state's rights, etc., how it is to be. And in that definition, issues like exclusive economic zone, etc., came to be defined. Territorial waters have been defined almost historically, whether it is 12 miles, in some cases 6 miles, some people have claimed up to 24 miles, etc. That's a matter of greater detail. More important is, what does international law recognize as your right within each one of these defined areas, and what you may do, what you may not do, what you may do in somebody else's areas. Now this is what this regulatory mechanism or the rules of business sort of indicate that. Essentially what it means is that within your territorial waters, your sovereign rights actually prevail. Your sovereign nation's rights prevail over that. Beyond that, you have a thing called right of innocent passage. As long as your passage can be certified to be innocent, it can be exercised by anybody. And of course, there are certain mechanisms, there are certain regulations within which warships, submarines, aircraft, etc., how they are to operate. It's all laid down as per that. Main thing is that everybody must have a right to be able to traverse the seas for own benefit, but nobody has a right to endanger a coastal state. Nobody has a right to, within parameters, to exploit a nation's own treasures, which may be, say, in area like exclusive economic zone.
Sir, most of India's oil and gas is coming from the littoral areas, whether it is Bombay High or the KG Basin. How can we protect these assets which are somewhat further out into the sea from intrusions like 2611 kind of commando-style attacks, where the logistics, the training is all commando level, but the non-state actors are playing a part in it?
Well, they have the your offshore exploitation assets have the advantage in that they are affected only by sea-based threat. It is not contiguous area to the land, and to that extent, a threat which originates on land will not affect them. But they are certainly exposed to all sea-based threats. Threats can be subsurface, threats can be surface, or threats can be airborne. And there are methodologies of having your protection zones around them. The first and foremost is an area around an asset wherein you say that is an exclusion zone. Nobody will come there because even innocently somebody can come and collide and thereby damage the thing. And therefore only authorized people who are trained for that, who are permitted to do that activity can come over there. And then you have mechanisms and force to see if a vessel or an aircraft or a unit is closing in. Then you keep track of it. There has to be a certain amount of surveillance kept in the area. There has to be identification as it starts coming closer, and then there has to be a positive tracking to see what is it that is going to do, what is it likely to do, and then of course interception if it is so required.
So my final question before we go into the homeland security or the terrorism aspect of this is, what does it take to have a proper blue water capability so that the Indian Navy can project Indian power well beyond the Indian Ocean, and in case terrorist strikes originate or there are hostile elements across the world, that we can actually be in a position to give a response and use that as a strategic platform to have some kind of leverage so that we are not the punching bag all the time.
I find your question very interesting, that you are mentioning blue water capability of Indian Navy to project power beyond Indian Ocean. Well, theoretically, all blue water navies are capable of projecting power beyond any seas. What it is dependent upon is what is the reach of that navy, and secondly, what is the staying power of that navy. That is a direct derivative of what kind of assets you have. What is the capability of those platforms. So Indian Navy is developing along well-conceived plans which have been in place almost from the time of independence. Only thing about naval plans, like all other operational activity, is that they are all dynamic. As time passes, you keep re-evaluating and you keep seeing as to what is your need and of course what is your budget. National aspirations also keep changing with passage of time. You recall till about the decade of 90s when we were having 2.5 to 3% Hindu rate of growth. At that time, national aspirations were at a certain level. When the growth boomed beyond that, aspirations changed, and you see the quality of life of man on the street has changed. And the more quality of life changes, the more assets you have, the more the more there is need to protect it. And armed forces come into that, and say navies come into that for that particular reason, because your trade has increased. 90% of India's trade by volume is over the seas, and trade was of the order of 500 million tons last year, and some $600 billion worth of trade. Now, to protect, I mean, just to give just one example, that is not the Navy's task to do it alone, but that itself gives a major indication of what the navies should be all about. And of course, power projection is in nature of, you don't actually get into combat, but you have a force in being, in that there is a certain amount of credibility of your deterrence which prevents somebody else, or shall we say in very courteous terms, it discourages somebody else from messing with you. That is the objective of it all. So the growth of the Navy over a period of time has to take that into account. So the naval plan, say, of the decade of 2010s will be entirely different from what it was in the decade of 1960s and 70s. Now we have reached a very balanced naval growth, and we have to now see as to how it is going on. And naval staff are fully engaged with that all the time, and it is a continuum actually. So there is no break point really. It is not a major deviation you do. It is over a period of time you grow the Navy in that manner.